Hi, hello, and if you're new to the channel, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. Now, this video is going to be about nature on the waterway, so a little bit different to my usual types of videos about narrowboats and narrowboat electrics and all that sort of stuff. I'm going to be looking at something quite remarkable to do with wildlife on the waterways. I'm down by the River Thames, and just over there, what you can't see is a large pond, and beyond that is a wood. And this is a truly remarkable story. It's a story about a magnificent migration that occurs in the UK every spring. Every spring, a herd of up to 10 to 11,000 animals sweep across the hillside, majestically sweep across the hillside, move down through the wood, cross a busy main road and head towards a pond. Yes, I'm talking about toads. And yes, I know I used the wrong collective noun. It should be a knot of toads, but if I'd said a majestic knot sweeps across the hillside, it would have sounded a bit weird. Anyway, this is a massive sort of migration of animals. Occurs every year between January and April. So I thought I would come along and have a look at it. As a kid, I remember cycling along this road. It was spring, and the road was absolutely covered in squashed dead toads. It was an incredible sight, almost looked like a carpet of toad skin going across the road. And I was intrigued by this, so I stopped and had a look in the field on my right and saw a large pond. I walked out there and discovered it was a spawning ground for the toads. Every spring, once the temperature gets above about 8 degrees at dusk, the toads move from the wood on the left down across the road and to their spawning pond, which is in the field on the right. Typically, it's thousands of toads will make that journey. I think the highest number in one season has been about 11,000, but typically it's between 5,000 and 11,000 toads will make that journey, along with some frogs and also some smooth newts. In the foreground now you can see the pond in which the toads spawn every spring. The toads spend the winter in the woodland that you can see at the back of the shot. Come the spring, once temperature starts getting above 7 or 8 degrees centigrade, they move down through the wood, across the busy main road, which you can just see behind the white cottage in the centre of the shot, and then move across the field to the spawning pond. Once the toads have spawned, they turn around, go back across the field, cross the road again, and enter the wood so that they can feed and build up their energy reserves to help them get through the winter hibernation and prepare for the march across the fields again to their spawning pond. When you think about it, it's quite some journey that these little amphibians have to do. All the way from those woods that you can see at the back of the shot, down through the woods, across the road, across that field, to the pond. Now, admittedly, some of the toads, the males, do cheat. They get a piggyback all the way down to the pond on the backs of the females. In the late 70s, to try and solve this problem of toad fatalities on the road every spring, 2 toad tunnels were installed. But there was a problem. The toads wouldn't use them as the tunnels were small, often full of rubbish and mud from the road, and were most likely too cold for them. The toads only move when the air temperature is above 7 or 8 degrees centigrade, and in the tunnels, even when the air temperature was right, the tunnels were still too cold for them. Hence, they didn't get used. Because the tunnels weren't being used, there was a need for the toad patrol. So the idea was the toads would exit the toad tunnel and then cross the field, heading down towards their spawning pond. And so this is where the toads are heading, a pond in a field so that they can spawn. They've come all the way down from the woods, across a busy main road, across a field to spawn. They've been hibernating up in the woods all winter and they won't have eaten for months. And as soon as they're spawned, they will head back up to the woods so they can eat. Now, I find the toad journey remarkable. They come down out of the woods and head towards their spawning pond. Now, admittedly, they don't use a stile, but they come to this busy main road, which, as you can see, I'm having trouble crossing. I can cross the road quite quickly and get to the other side. Toads, they take quite a bit of time to get across that road. Once across the road, they will go under the fence, unlike me, who athletically bounds across the top of the fence, and then they head down across the field. The field is okay. They have no problems with the field. It's normally sort of wet and marshy, and there is a bit of grass cover. Males and female toads will move across this field as singles, or the females will move across the field carrying a male on their back. As you can see, it's quite a journey down to this pond. And the toads do this every year. They return to this pond to spawn. There's also some frogs that head down this way and some smooth newts. But it's mainly the toads that make this journey. And also, don't forget, they've got to return to the woods. So there will be toads going in both directions. Some will be heading down to the pond and some will be coming back from the pond. As you can see, it's a fair walk. And there's the pond. That is where the toads are heading to spawn. And when I was a kid, I came to this pond and I was stunned at the number of toads that I could see in the shallows. You don't seem to see that many these days. But in the shallows then, before they dredged the pond, you could see dozens, hundreds of toads, lots and lots of frog spawn and lots of toad spawn. But you don't seem to see that much these days. As the toads won't use the toad tunnels, the Toad Patrol has installed a permanent toad barrier in the woods. This toad barrier was donated to them by a company. The permanent toad barrier will eventually span the whole length of the woods, and this prevents the toads from getting down and onto the road. During the spring, each evening, the toad patrollers will walk up and down this barrier, picking up any toads that are stopped. The toad patrollers will also be on the lookout for any toads coming back up from the pond that have got stuck on the wrong side of the barrier. Again, these toads will be picked up and then dropped off in the wood on the left. In the field next to the woods, there isn't a permanent barrier. A temporary barrier is put up every January and taken down every April. Again, the toad patrollers walk along this barrier with their buckets, picking up the toads and then helping them across the road and down to the pond. There is also a barrier to catch the returning toads so that they can be escorted across the road and not squashed as they head back from the pond up to their feeding grounds. Here I am at the barrier. Now this part of the barrier is currently temporary whilst the toad patrollers install the permanent barrier, which you can see stacked up on the left. Now don't worry, I'm not going to show you the full length of the barrier in real time because it takes about 5 to 6 minutes walking at this speed to go from one end to the other. When you're looking for toads along the barrier, it takes longer than 5 to 6 minutes because you're constantly stopping, looking under the barrier, checking for toads, possibly moving leaves, etc., to see if you can spot any toads to pick up to put in your buckets. Having the permanent barrier in the woods is great because this means that the patrollers don't have to put up a temporary barrier every spring and take it down around Easter time. So the permanent barrier will finish just before the field, and this means that every January the toad patrollers will still need to put up this temporary barrier in the field so that the toads don't come across the field and then onto the road. And that's it, that's the full length of the toad barrier. And on warm spring evenings between the end of January and the start of April, toad patrollers can be found wandering up and down the barrier looking for toads. In the evenings and early mornings, the toad patrollers will walk along the barrier looking for toads. And this is what it's all about. Here we have got a female toad with a male toad hitching a ride on their back. These two toads will be heading down towards the lake to spawn. The thing is though, the barrier is in the way, so the toad patrollers will pick these two toads up and put them in a bucket. The toad patrollers have two buckets, one for single toads and one for paired up toads, because if you put a paired up set of toads in a bucket with a load of single toads, you end up with one big mass of toads with all the male toads trying to jump on top of the female. So these toads, as I say, will be picked up in a bucket, walked across the road and taken down to the pond where they will spawn. Later the toads will return back up through the field and back into the woods. So here I am back down at the toad barrier. I'm wearing my high-vis vest so that I can go out on the road. I've got my head torch on and I've got my main torch so I can look for toads. Down at the pond there are already some toad patrollers dropping off the toads and frogs they have collected from the barrier. And here's my first toad pair of the evening. Slightly confusing. They don't seem to know which way they're going. Again, it's a male and a female. The male is being given a piggyback by the female. Walking along the barrier, looking for toads, frogs and newts. And this is how the toad patrol spends its evenings. Walking up and down the barrier, looking for toads, newts to put in their buckets, and frogs to take down to the spawning pond. And that's what it's all about. There's a single toad at the barrier. Another single toad for my bucket. And there is a smooth newt. And there's my first frog of the evening. So it's not all about toads. Once you've got your bucket of toad and frogs, you take them down to the pond across the field. So that is the frogs and toads that I've collected this evening from a couple of sweeps of the barrier, backwards and forwards. I've got one bucket of pairs and I've got one bucket of singles. And I've now brought them down to the pond and I'm going to release them. The most incredible thing is, though, the sound that they make. Just listen. So what were the final scores on the doors for last night? Well, I moved 9 frogs, 5 single male toads, 11 pairs and 1 triplet. So a total of 30 toads and 9 frogs. The newt you saw me with earlier in the video, I dropped off in the wood because it seemed to be heading in that direction. On the evening I visited, on site there were 21 volunteers, including myself. And between us, we moved an absolutely staggering 486 toads, 84 frogs and 24 smooth newts down to the spawning pond. The volunteers also picked up and helped back across the road into the woods a total of 163 returning toads, 20 returning frogs and 1 smooth newt. At dawn the following day, 3 volunteers picked up another 144 toads at the barrier, 9 frogs and 2 smooth newts, and took them down to the pond. They also picked up 21 returning toads and 1 returning frog, took them across the road and put them in the wood. In total, I think this brings it to a running total of about 8,000 toads for the year. Quite staggering. Anyway, it was a fun evening walking the barrier and I found it strangely relaxing. I'll be back. Anyway, hopefully you found that interesting. I certainly find it amazing that there's such a big movement of animals. And if you liked what you listened to here and seen here, don't forget to like and subscribe. On the screen now, you will see a QR code that will take you through to a newsletter about the grey wagtail. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.